time between Thanksgiving and Christmas, getting ready for the holidays. So we appreciate you being here for our final College and Coffee of the semester. We are going to do kind of a bare bones approach, knowing there's 9th through, probably not 12th grade, probably 9th through 11th grade parents in the room. Presentation on the role of these tests in college admissions, and also a little information on the subject tests as well, and in addition, information on colleges that maybe don't use these tests in the same way that the majority of schools do. So we're happy that you're here. We hope you take some information from this presentation that you didn't have before. And there is a handout because, as many of you have already heard, the SAT has changed. There's a lot of anxiety around this. So College Board provided this simple, just look at how it's different visually. It's an easy to read handout. So if you didn't get it, Mr. Borchard is passing it out. By the way, I'm Mrs. Gallant, for those of you who haven't been here before, and all of the counseling staff is here with the exception of our therapist, so she's off on Friday. So we have Brother Tom, and Ms. Wallace, Mrs. Cuneo, Mrs. Cowgill, and Mr. Fuller, and Mr. Borchard is passing out. Okay, so basically what is the role of these scores in the college admissions process? The college, and all of us took these as well. These were initially created to kind of level the playing field. So this school versus a high school in Kansas or Iowa, what is it that's going to be the factor that is consistent across the board? So they came up with these college admissions tests so that every student is taking this test, and then it's hopefully going to indicate where they stand as an individual student, and in terms of how well they can do at that particular college. So they use it in the admissions decision. They publish student scores. What that means is, not your child's name and their score, but if you look up colleges and kind of start to get the basic information on a college, you'll see that they either publish their average ACT, average SAT, or what most of them use is a mid-range. So this is what the the mid-range 50% of their students in admissions get. And so that's just supposed to be a helpful number for you and your students in kind of deciding the how good of a fit that is for your particular student. Is if their SAT or ACT score is in that mid-range, that's a good indication. If it's above, that's a great indication. If it's below, that's when you maybe put that college on your students list as more of a reach school. Scores let colleges find students. What that means is, a lot of times parents will say, once my student took the PSAT or once my student took the SAT, I started getting all this mail or email. That's because colleges will look at the scores to reach out to students that are in that mid-range area, or the high area for their particular college. Colleges use it sometimes to determine how to place a student in courses in the school. For scholarship consideration, you'll see when you go on certain schools' websites that they'll say that the student needs a minimum of this GPA from their school and a minimum of this SAT or ACT score for them to qualify for a particular scholarship. So again, they use it as a way to they use that test score as a way to look at any student across the nation from any school and what is their score on the same test that everybody took. They look at it in very different ways. Sometimes schools require it, and we'll talk about this more throughout the presentation. Some of them look at the highest combined scores from one test date, and some accept the highest section from any test date. So you'll hear the term super score. What that means is that if a student takes it 2 times and they do better in the math on one day and they do better on the writing or English on another day, they'll take the highest score and they'll make a new test score for that student. So it's their highest in each section based on each sitting that they did 2, maybe 3 times. We don't really recommend that they do it more than that many times. So that's what super score, when you hear super score, that's what it means. It's just the best score from each time they sat in each section. Students love when schools do that, but it's, you know, it's school to school. It's not a consistent thing. So, and the colleges, again, will have on their websites whether or not they super score. So it's a hard thing to try to memorize, but it's easy to find when you look at their admissions pages. What matters most? It's still their GPA, you know, so kids will say, you know, oh, I got, you know, a perfect score on my ACT, but, you know, they have not a great GPA. That helps, of course, but it's really important for you to help us emphasize to your kids that grades always matter. They are the first thing that colleges look at, and so it's important for them to be keeping that GPA up. They also look at the rigor of the courses that your students are taking. So are they challenging themselves in classes? It's always a question that we get even when we go to the middle school and talk at high school and coffees is, you know, well, if a straight A student never challenges themselves with honors and APs but still gets straight A's, is that better than? Colleges assure us over and over again that they want to see rigor. They want to see that your students are challenging themselves with the most rigorous course that they can handle. And that's also important because we don't want to see kids in a lot of honors and APs and then getting by the skin of their teeth C's. So they have to challenge themselves but also know that they can be successful in those classes because colleges do look at that. They also look at progression over time. So are grades in rigor going up or down? Now, understandably, students have a rough semester here and there, things like that. That's all. We can explain that with letters of recommendation. They can explain that with their essays. But in general, just speaking in general, they want to see grades going up and rigor going up. We have it set in place here at Chaminade where we have caps on the AP as they go up. So we have only 1 is allowed to be taken as a sophomore, 3 as a junior, 4 as a senior. So we kind of help with that and still limit it to the point where students can still eat, sleep, do their extracurriculars, hopefully enjoy high school. And then remember that colleges may recalculate the GPA. Without being too confusing, colleges basically take our transcript and reconfigure it in any way that they wish. So sometimes they'll take out, for example, PE. The easiest example and probably the most confusing are the UCs and Cal States because they only look at sophomore and junior grades to calculate their UC Cal State GPA, and they only look at the classes that they have approved. And Chaminade has an approved list that's easy to look up. But so when we are working with our students, our seniors, you know, we take their transcript and we'll X out the PEs and the classes that don't count and only use their sophomore and junior GPA. And a lot of times that alters their GPA a little bit or a lot. But we will help you and them with that through the process. So for this presentation, just know that colleges will often recalculate GPA. I was just in a conversation with parents about, you know, if a student doesn't gets a deficiency in a class and then makes it up in the summer, you know, some high schools will replace that and some high schools just average it. But what I want you all to know is that colleges will do whatever they want with that. So the Cal States will replace it. So it just depends on the college that your student is applying to. Okay, so you have heard of the ACT and SAT. There is a common myth that colleges prefer one over the other. That's not true. They want to see whichever one your student does the best on. So as a counseling office, we recommend that students take both. Now we're hearing that a lot of students are getting recommendations from outside people that they should only focus on the ACT because the SAT is new. We still stand by what we've always said, and that is that they should try both in the spring. There's some anxiety around the fact that the SAT is new, but the good news, in my opinion, and I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, is that our juniors and sophomores saw the new SAT for the first time of anybody else in October when they took the PSAT. And as I worked with my juniors over the last month or so and asked them what did they think about the new PSAT, or the new SAT, based on the PSAT, they've said, it seemed pretty easy. So unless they're fooling themselves, and we'll find out in the next couple weeks when we get their scores back, there's a good chance that all of this anxiety around the new SAT is for naught, and that maybe it is a great test. And so we really want your kids to be, as juniors, taking both tests in the spring. The ACT is, there's a new essay which is a little longer, but other than that it stayed the same. So this is kind of a breakdown of what it looks like. There's an English section, math, reading, science. The science is a science reasoning, and if you take a look at a practice question, it's kind of like a, they're wordy and they have to figure it out. So it's not necessary, they do need to know science going into it, but it's also something they can figure out through the passage. And then there's an optional writing, although at Chaminade we ask them to definitely take the writing. Do not opt out of the writing, because there are colleges out there that require the writing, and we want our students to be keeping as many doors open for themselves going through this process as possible. What we try to avoid for our kids is letting them get overburdened by test taking. So and that's why, again, a lot of people for the class of 2017 are having their kids take the current SAT, the new SAT, and the ACT. For the sake of students' sanity, we were hoping to encourage them to only take the new SAT and the ACT. But a lot of people are getting mixed messages about that, and so they've had their kids take the current one, and now they'll take the other two. But we always want them to be taking writing, because it would be a shame if they took the ACT without writing, did awesome, and then applied to their schools and they said, but we needed it with writing, and they have to go sit for it again. So with that said, we're going to switch over and talk about the new SAT.
All this testing information is fascinating, right? So moving on, so Mrs. Gallant talked a little bit about the ACT. I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the new SAT and the changes that have been made to it. There is a typo. It's now one reading section. The critical reading and the mathematics, they did take away the writing section, making the writing section now optional. And that's a separate score for students. Again, kind of piggybacking on what Mrs. Gallant said, definitely students still want to take it with the writing portion, because some colleges are going to want the SAT with the writing portion. They don't take it, they're then left taking it again, and we obviously want them to avoid having to take that exam another additional time if they don't really have to. You can also see the math section is broken down in two ways. There is a calculator portion and a non-calculator portion as well, and then it gives you the breakdown. The test is 3 hours in length with the optional essay as well. And that essay is 50 minutes, and again, we would encourage students to go ahead and sign up to take it with the writing. The first time that they can take the new SAT is in March of 2016. That leaves them March, May, and June to go ahead and get one of those exams in before they head into their senior year, along with the ACT as well. Looking at the new scoring guidelines, so the current SAT was at a 2400, I'm sure you're really familiar with that. And then there was also that guessing penalty that students received on that. So for every wrong answer, they got an additional quarter of a point marked off. The new SAT is back to the 1600, right, with the writing being optional. And then there no longer is a wrong answer penalty. So that should make students really, really happy. And then the ACT out of 36, again, the optional essay, Mrs. Gallant spoke about that. Again, they should be taking that, the ACT with the writing portion. And then they don't have a wrong answer penalty. So testing recommendations. So as your student travels through their years at Chaminade, they'll have exposure to both the ACT and the SAT before they actually take it in the springtime of their junior year. So freshman year in the fall, on testing day, they take Aspire. It's a practice ACT. I always stress, I think we all stress to our students that they shouldn't panic when they see their score. Sometimes they do. It is a curriculum-based test. They take it in October. They're still learning and developing, so they haven't necessarily had all the curriculum needed for that exam. And again, it's one test on one testing day. Oftentimes, students don't take it as seriously as well in freshman year. So again, it's just to give them that exposure. It's not to, it's not for them to get their score back and think, I'm never getting into college. Look at what I got. I promise they're going to get into colleges. In the fall of sophomore year, they'll go ahead and take the PSAT, so they get exposure to that. They'll take it again in junior year as well. In junior year is when it counts and matters for the National Merit Scholarship. It's the top 1% of students in the nation who will qualify, and then there's a process from there. Also, moving back to sophomore year, again, they shouldn't panic or stress over their grade that they over their score that they received or earned on that exam. It's one test again on one testing day. They're going to take it again in junior year as well. So oftentimes in December when those scores come back, students tend to panic a little or think like, I'm doomed. They're not doomed. I promise they're going to be okay. And then in the springtime of junior year, they'll go ahead and take the actual SAT and the ACT as well. So we'll talk about prepping in a second. The next slide is about that, so we will cover it. They should definitely, by the end of their junior year, have taken an SAT and an ACT. And this way, they're able to go ahead and retake in the early part of their senior year, which test they felt they did better on and want to try and improve that score. And that should be done by November. Again, avoid testing burnout. I think Mrs. Gallant touched upon that a little bit. This year we had juniors taking the old one and then they're going to take the new one and then they're going to take the ACT. That's a lot of testing. I would say don't panic, breathe, and pray through it all. It will definitely help. It's all going to be okay, I promise. So again, you really want to avoid that. And I've had students who have taken it, on average we say, once to twice, 2 to 3 times, but no more than 3 times. The students aren't really going to see a change after that. I had a student who in the past took it 3 times, kept going for it, and the student's score really much maintained pretty similar throughout the 3. Only to leave that student very frustrated and disappointed. So again, avoid that burnout. So prepping. So oftentimes people think they need to spend a lot of money on test prep companies. That is an option, and depending upon your student and what works best for them, but you definitely don't need to start there. I always, and I think as counselors in general, we always encourage our students to go for the free stuff first, try to save the parents some money. So we offer Schmoop here through at Chaminade, and we pay for that program for students. There's prep for the SAT and ACT. They also have subject test prep on there, and then AP prep as well, I believe. And again, that's free. Khan Academy has partnered with College Board, and they developed a prep for the SAT, and students are really, really liking that and finding it really beneficial, so that's a great starting point as well. And then also in Blackboard, in your child's counseling class, there are some free test prep links. I think it's underneath external links. And there's a test prep folder, and if you click on that, you'll see other websites as well. Again, they can definitely start there to get exposure, and then kind of evaluate from that point whether additional help is needed. In terms of test prep as well, just be mindful. Like if you do decide to go with a company, they're a business at the end of the day. So just know what you're getting, and it's not to say that they're not helpful. Sometimes students aren't very self-motivated, so maybe they need to have that person to be accountable to. Moving on to subject tests.
Okay, this is part 3 of 3, I promise. I noticed a lot of you feverishly taking notes, and just want to let you know that we will post this presentation. If you want to go back or save your hands a little bit, we will be having this available to you. So the last part of our testing information is going to be on subject tests. Anyone heard of a subject test before? Yeah? Okay. So as many of you know, there are multiple choice exams in one subject area. And they are available through College Board. It's an SAT exam, but they're known as subject tests because they test the mastery of one subject area. And they are only an hour long, and a student can take up to 3 on one given day. So say they're taking the SAT in March and they want to take the subject test in May. If their subject is available, they can take 1, 2, or all 3 exams just to give it a try in one day. They are not required by most colleges. That's something that we want to make sure everybody knows. In the past, 2 subject tests were always required for UC applications, which is why most people did know about subject tests and most kids were taking them to be prepared for the UCs. But a few years ago, the UCs changed that requirement, so it is no longer a requirement of the UCs. So we have seen far fewer students taking the subject tests, but that doesn't mean they're not still useful, which I'll get to. We do recommend them for students in applicable AP classes to show their mastery in that subject. So even if they're not required by a school that your student's applying to, if they're really good at math, or they're really strong writers, or they're really gifted in science, or they're in an AP class that coordinates with that subject, why not take it? That way you're submitting the scores to the college, and the college can see that you have a talent in that area. So if it's optional or just recommended, it can help a student in that way. So typically what we recommend here in our office is if a student is in an AP class, in the spring of that year, they will take the subject exam. So for the first time, many students are in an AP class in 10th grade for AP World History. So an example of that would be their 10th graders in May or June of their 10th grade year, they could take the World History subject exam. Okay, and then moving on through 11th and 12th grade, the same thing would be our recommendation if they're in AP Chemistry, AP Physics, if they're in AP Literature, all of those things. If they're really doing well in those classes, we would advise them to try a subject exam. Okay, and then the last point here too is while they might not be required at many schools, depending on a student's major, they can be recommended or sometimes required. The best example is engineering. Most engineering schools will want to see another example of a student's mastery of math. So they will ask them to take the Math 2 subject test, and then usually a science. So the example here was Math 2 and Physics. Okay, and then as I mentioned, not all schools, not many schools require the subject test. Some of them do though, and as you'll see, here's some examples. Dartmouth, Duke, Georgetown, Caltech, Harvard, Harvey-Mudd, Brown, Vassar, Carnegie Mellon, Columbia. What do you guys see as a theme through those schools? Some of them are Ivies, but all of them are just very selective schools. Okay, so if they require the subject test, which, as we tell every student when they're applying to college, every school is a little bit different. They have the ability to require certain things. That's why college application process can be so taxing sometimes, because you really have to check individual requirements of each school. So the subject test is a perfect example. A student might be applying to all schools that don't need the subject test, but then they have maybe one of their reach schools or just a school they really love on their list from one of these examples. There are more of these, of course. I just chose these as some examples. But you'll see that they would need to make sure that they have 2 or 3 of the subject tests to submit to them in the fall. And as you can see, they are some of the more selective schools in the United States. Strongly recommended, not required: Stanford, Princeton, Emory, UCLA, Berkeley, UCSB, UCSD, USC, Yale, University of Georgia. So again, any school that requires or recommends strongly that a student take a subject test, typically they're going to be the more competitive university. Sending test scores. This is something that students will do in the fall of their senior year, not before. Okay, so once a student has their college list, they know where they're applying, they know all the tests that they need to have taken, and they've taken those tests, they will go ahead and submit their test scores. Okay, so a few things. Test scores are sent electronically. We do not send the test scores, and we do not put them on the transcripts, which a lot of students think that we do. Colleges have to have test scores be officially submitted from the testing agency to consider them official. So when students are applying to college, they self-report them in their application, and a lot of times I've had, especially this year, students have said, well, I already sent them. And they really just meant that they enlisted them on their application, so they forget the next step, that they actually have to go on the websites. There's the College Board website for SAT tests, the actstudent.org for ACT. They have to log in, view their scores, get out your old credit card again, and send those scores to each individual school, okay? You'll have that happen a lot to you, unfortunately. Okay, So the colleges want to hear directly from the institutions, okay? And as Mrs. Gallant said earlier, colleges will accept scores from either the ACT or the SAT or both. And here, yes, they really will. Okay, we get that question a lot. Like, are you sure? I don't know. You know, yes, they do not care. Okay, and we have to tell students that every year ad nauseum. They don't care. They just want to see your test scores. And even if usually we make a blanket recommendation, send all your scores. It's not going to hurt you. You know, because say you did a lot better on the ACT than the SAT, they're going to use the ACT then. Okay, they're going to use what's in the best interest of the student. But they just want to see how you've tested. And then in that case too, if you didn't, say you had the flu the day you took the ACT, don't send it. No big deal. Send the SAT. Okay? And as Ms. Gallant also said, many colleges will still accept scores from the old SAT if you have a student who's planning to do that or did that. But again, you always want to check with the individual college admission policies. And then kind of an interesting phenomenon many people don't really know about is that there are test optional schools out there. Over 815 schools in the U.S. do not require tests at all. Which you might be saying, yay, hallelujah, we don't have to worry about test scores. But there are caveats to that, okay? Many times that will mean that the schools have GPA requirements, and usually that will be more competitive because they're not using the testing in their puzzle. They're using just the GPA, so often it will be more competitive. And then some of them may often require extra things like a graded assignment. I know it sounds really weird, but sometimes the schools just want to see something else from you, so they would ask for that. Okay. The reason that test optional schools exist are they believe that it invites more diversity to not rely on test scores. They don't want to over-rely on tests. Testing as a whole is very controversial. There's always, arguments for it, against it. How does it really test how you're going to do in college? And I hope all of you know that, it doesn't necessarily make or break you, and it doesn't show how you're going to do in college. We've all been down the path, everyone in this room, that maybe you weren't even a really great high school student, but look, you ended up just fine, right? You went to a great college, you ended up, everyone has their own path. That's the important thing. So it's always that argument, and so these test optional schools have answered that argument by saying, okay, well then we're not going to rely on those scores. They also believe that they're attracting more academically capable students, and then they also put all their focus on the high school performance, which as we know is the #1 criteria anyway. Colleges care a lot more about what you've done over 4 years in your grades and your classes and your course selections than what you've done in 4 hours on a Saturday. So that's also something we try to stress to our students. But the whole reason for having this college and coffee is because testing is a necessary evil, so we have to address it, and we have to give our recommendations, of course, because colleges still want to see it, typically. And even with that, if a student finds themselves applying to a test optional school, whether it's just by chance or because they actually just want to give it a try and they like, that they have that policy, they still might want to submit their test scores just to, have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed. Okay. So that's a lot of information for all of you, I know. But now all of us will take some time to answer your questions, if you have any. Yeah.
Hi. When do the juniors get their PSAT scores back?
In the next couple weeks, we're going to pass them out.
And the kids bring them home?
Yes.
Or it's Monday? So they'll do the background? And then which
We encourage them to, Mrs. Crum. Whether they get to you is another story.
That was my main question, if that has come by.
This year, I don't know. No, they should be a sheet, just like always.
Will you be
Okay,
sending
so-
us an email to let us know when it's been passed out to the kids so then?
We can
work
put that in the
after?
CTW.
Okay.
So check your CTW,
Oh,
and we'll let you know the dates we're going to distribute them.
So the kids are given the PSAT in the school, but how do you go about setting up the SAT and the ACT to
Great
take the
question.
test?
Yes. Do you want to take
Yeah,
that?
sure. Yeah, so we administer the PSAT for them, so it's really easy. They don't have to think about it. But when they're juniors, we talk to them about what their testing schedule will be. So we give them, our recommendations that we gave you guys today to do one of each in the spring. And what they'll do is they'll go to College Board's website to sign up for the SAT. They choose, create a login, choose their date, pay with your old credit card, get their test date all set. And the same for ACT. Just go to the ACT website, log in, create an account, and pay for the exam.
Just as a comment, their checklists, I have a senior now, and your checklists are amazing, the way, you dealt with our transfer and just the checklist that he comes home and I can look it up and everything's checked off.
Oh,
So I just
good.
really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
And also piggyback on her question, the Navion she was telling me about, that's through the school, how do you get to that? I'm just trying to look for it, or is that when you're a senior?
No, you can have it now, Val.
Yeah, we try to get
We'll
the students
email
on
you.
it in ninth grade.
Oh.
They're a little less
Okay.
motivated in ninth grade. I don't think they see the big picture. But as early as ninth grade, we talk to them about using Navions, how to log in. Parents have a login as well. So if you don't have your login, you can just email your child's counselor and we'll give it to you.
They use Navion starting in ninth grade because that's how they log their community service hours. So they're on, whether you know they're on or not, they are on. And that's something that we spend some time with them each time we do their formal visit for that semester. So I guarantee your student knows how to get on. It's their Blackboard or Net Classroom login. So we made it all one, so there's only one to remember. If you don't have it, just email your child's counselor and we're happy to send it to you.
And if the rest of you are confused about what a checklist means, with our seniors, we have a checklist that we give them. Again, there's a chance you all may not be seeing it, but we give them and go through what they need to do and when. We do a lot of that, starting with the boot camp in the summer. Well, actually, probably starting even in junior year. But there's also a formal form that we'll go through. But we do it in boot camp, we do it in their first workshops, we do it in their spring workshops in the junior year. We try to get it to them, but.
And there's a checklist, that's a paper checklist that she's talking about. There's also a checklist starting from their second semester freshman year that's on their Navions. So on Navions, they have tasks that we set up for them every semester. So every semester, there's certain tasks that they should be working on that as long as they're completing, they're gonna be on track. And so every semester, the council go over that with the students. They know where those tasks are. When you guys get your login, you'll be able to log in and see what tasks they've completed, which ones are in progress. But that's also on Navions as well. And then once senior year hits, we actually give them paper because they like to check it off. Feel they've accomplished stuff.
And put the checklist right by your computer when you wake up in the morning and just make sure, and then bug your senior to make sure everything's checked off. And you get your transfer grades.
Can you come to our meetings? That sounds good.
I'm in the midst right now, but you guys have been really fantastic. I have nothing but good things.
Thank you. Thank you.
Two questions. Are the PSATs posted on their College Board account at all? Or,
I don't think so, because it's not something that the colleges will ever get.
okay.
And so it doesn't go out when College Board sends out their SAT and AP scores and all of that, it's not part of the bundle.
Okay, and also, have you announced your dates for the boot camp stuff over the summer yet? I mean, I know it's early, but
We're still working on that.
all
to be
the other
honest with you.
people want deposits for dates and things like that, and I want to make sure that I have that blocked out. to
It's
do
all,
it.
it's.
We're working on it.
Yeah, it's been in conversation, it
Yeah.
just hasn't been finalized.
Highly recommend the boot camp, highly. Highly.
She's not being paid for these announcements.
I'm just living it right now. I'm coming for
We
support.
appreciate it, but we will
I'm coming
not
for
come.
support.
Yeah, junior parents, just so you know, they really get a good chunk of their applications done in that boot camp, and dates to be announced soon, we promise.
For the SAT subject test, what's the main difference with the AP test? Because I know they will take the AP test in May, right? So which one is harder or they kind of harder?
I'm not sure which one's
I don't know
harder.
about difficulty-wise, they're two different tests. But the AP scores are used for, a lot of schools will waive an actual course at the school, because AP classes are designed to be like college-level courses. So if they get a 5 on a history exam and they were going to take History 101, their college might waive History 101 based on that score.
I have a suggestion that in Schmoop, you can look at the subject test in math, and you can see for yourself what the material looks like compared to the AP, which is ridiculously hard.
Yeah, I mean, the AP exam itself is, I would say, the much more challenging
Much more
exam.
challenging.
The writing component, there are more, application questions where they're taking the knowledge that they've learned for a year in a course and having to answer. It's not a direct question, what year was the war of whatever, I'm not a social science person, but, so those are more objective on the subject test, where the AP exam is a much more, summative assessment of what they learned for an entire year. So it is a very different exam. I have kids all the time who tell me like, oh, I just took the AP exam, I'm gonna go take the subject test in this area. You need to do a little bit of prep just to get yourself used to the different format of the questions for the subject test. The content obviously is there, and AP exams are 3 to 4 hours, and subject exams an hour and 10 minutes.
So the college, I know the AP test, they have like a 3, 4, 5, and but they also, on the transcript, they graded like ABC. So which one the college won't care? They look at the,
Well, those are two separate issues. You get a grade for an AP class, just like you get a grade for any other class that you take. And then you get your score on the exam. And what the grade goes into your high school level GPA. Your score is an indication for that college what your mastery was in a very standardized way across the country. And that's what a college would use, not the grade, but the score to determine if that student at that particular school would receive credit, college credit, or be waived out of a class.
just my question is like, what happened if students get an A on the transcript for AP, let's say, work history? But the actual exam, you only got a 2 or 3. That could happen, right?
Oh, yes, it can happen. Yes, it can.
So how the college look at that? You got an A on the transcript, but your score is only 2 or 3, so how do you evaluate?
Colleges always tell us that AP credit is like a bonus. They always want to see that if a student took an AP class that they tried the exam. So even if they get a 1 or a 2 and they don't pass, because passing is 3, they're not going to be, it's not going to be a point against them. They just want to see that they tried the exam. So, and if they pass the exam, then they're going to say, oh, great, that's a positive. But they're not going to say, oh, he didn't pass, okay, he's out. You know.
So it's more the grade on the transcript is more important. Is that right? Or?
Overall, yes, because that helps the GPA, and that the grades are important as we've discussed. In terms of the AP credit being important, is if you get college credit or you get exempt from a class, whatever the college does with that credit. So it's all important. It's just that an AP score isn't going to decide a student's fate.
I'm still confused as to why they offer a Math 1 test and a Math 2 test. If you're going to be an engineer, obviously you need to be in that advanced math class and do well on that Math 2 subject test if you want to send it, if the college takes it, blah, blah, blah. But if you're an honors student doing well in your math classes as a junior, why wouldn't you want to take that Math 1 subject test? Let's just say you're not in 3 AP classes, but you're a good math student. Wouldn't you want to take that Math 1 test? If you do well, submit it. I mean, it just seems like otherwise why do they offer it?
I'm not sure why they offer it, but there's no harm in taking it. It's just that for engineering students or math or science students, they want the math too.
Right. I know, but what about just for like a liberal arts student who's done well in math, all 4 years or 3, whatever?
It's really meant to be more in alignment of what the student's math curriculum has been in high school. So we have several feeder schools or public schools on occasion where students are, and not necessarily here, but students may only have pre-algebra in 9th grade or not have started Algebra 1 as an 8th grader. And so their math has to obviously follow a sequence. And so the Math 1 exists for those students to be able to demonstrate their mastery. It's it's not a negative to a student that that's the school they went to and that's where they were placed in math when they started high school. What you wouldn't want to see, honestly, if you're in calculus and you're taking that test, that's going to hold absolutely no weight in the admissions process. They would expect that you would be taking the subject test in the area that coincides with what your curriculum in high school has been.
So can you just review where they coincide exactly? The subject test, not the AP test, obviously, but
Well,
Math two,
the
where should
problem
you
with
be?
the one is it's very repetitive in what the actual math is on the actual test. So the main one they take, the reading and the math is very similar. So basically it's a little bit through Algebra 2, there's a little bit of trig, a little bit of that. So if a student here, which is, students are in pre-calculus and, usually by junior year for most students, not all students. So if you've completed that subject area, you should be taking the math 2. You're going to have exceeded the math that is on the 1.
So as a junior, if you're in pre-calc, you should take the Math 2 test.
That is
In
what
the
the
spring.
expectation would be for the college, that would use that as a tool.
And is there anything, by the time junior year is done, is there anything on the Math 2 test that wasn't covered?
What we cover should, yes, the curriculum that we
coincide.
have, it should be covered by the Math 2.
And
yeah.
so what, if you're in math analysis, I have 2 kids.
Mhm.
If you're in math analysis, should you take the Math 1 test by the end of
That would be
junior
more
year?
appropriate, yes.
Okay.
And just keep in mind that they don't have to take a math
I know,
subject
right.
test. Yeah,
I know, but
so
just in case they want to apply to
Oh.
Santa Barbara,
Mhm.
I mean,
right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
that's-
otherwise, I would say,
yeah.
we'd recommend choosing subjects that they are really, excelling in, or that are in maybe honors level. or
well, the
anything.
math analysis child isn't going to take an AP class. So
Right.
if he could do well on the Math 1
Right.
test,
Yeah.
that might be a nice
Yeah.
thing to include in an application to
Right.
anywhere, because
Right.
they'll take them, they just don't necessarily care about them. But of course, if you don't do well on it, then I guess you don't have to send it.
Right.
Well, just know, not all schools take them either.
Right.
That is not a given, that
Right.
you can send them, but they do not have a formula
Yeah.
to include them in,
Right.
in the review process.
Do you know, are those mostly like public schools throughout the country? Do they,
But they're
they're just all different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how many classes of the test do you?
If the school's requiring them, on average, it's 2. There are few schools that require 3.
What about the UCC strongly recommended?
They strongly recommend 2.
Oh, one more question. What happens with accommodations on subject tests?
What's that?
Like if they have accommodations,
Oh, they get time and a half.
they do even on subject?
Yep, and on APs. Anything that college, if they're approved through College Board, any test that College Board administers, they get whatever their accommodations is.
Okay.
Small group setting, time and a half, no Scantron, whatever it is that College Board said is for all their tests.
I have a question. As a junior, lot of kids just have maybe one AP until junior year. Then when they take the subject test, it's possible to do it this coming spring. So obviously they're gonna have only one subject test result before they apply in November. So when they are senior, you don't recommend any subject test after that, AP class in senior year.
I think we need to
Correct.
clarify that it's not always, you don't always have to be in an AP class. There are other classes that we offer here. The one that comes to mind, Honors Brit Lit, or if your student maybe isn't even in Honors Brit Lit just because of the workload, but they're very strong writer, they're very good in the analysis of literature. Our students tend to do extremely well on the subject test in literature, for example. So, and I've had students take it, as I'm sure everyone else has, that hasn't been in Honors Brit Lit, but does really well on that. So,
What is that one called? It's
Literature.
just called literature?
yeah,
It could be any literature.
it's a lot of poems, and it's a lot of what they're doing junior year.
Okay.
So the skill set is there, and they're doing it in class. So that's why this is a very specific, individualized, what is best for that particular student. We're giving you general rules, but that's why you're sitting down, with whoever your child's counselor is and determining, are subject tests appropriate? If they are appropriate, given where we think this child might be applying, which ones would be appropriate for that child? This is, this can get overwhelming, the testing part, because it's not the same for every student. And so that's, what we need to give you the message that, that's why we're here, to give you individual advice for what's best for your family.
last junior meeting, you know, we had a meeting in the Taco Center. And the UCLA representative says 2 subject tests is recommended and 1 has to be science. And, you know, have you heard that? 1 has to be science. So I was
Was he
No,
talking
that was
about
not
a
what was
particular
said.
major?
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could have been a particular major.
Yeah, he might have been giving a
So it doesn't have to be one.
Yeah,
No.
sometimes in particular areas like engineering
Right.
or biological sciences, or there are certain majors that require them, but there's never, again, a blanket, you must have this and you must have this. Mhm.
And a lot of parents ask us to recommend test prep companies. We don't endorse any particular company, but we really do, we're not just saying it, we really do believe that if they were able to be self-motivated and use the SHMOOP, and particularly the Khan Academy for SAT, if any of you have time to Google Sal Khan, Brother Tom and I heard him speak. He is an amazing man. Like, this is a non-profit organization that he has established for the sake of helping students who cannot pay for this stuff. He does all subjects, but he partnered with College Board, and there are 4 full-length tests on his site, on Khan Academy, and they take the test. It determines where they need to study more. They study, it gives them help with that. Then they go back and they take the second up to 4 practice full-length exams for free. So we can't emphasize that enough. And you know, if you want the credibility, Google him. He's so interesting to listen to. I drank his Kool-Aid. I thought he was awesome. And so did Brother Tom. I felt really lucky to be in that room and hearing him speak. So, you know, like, I know there's a lot, like, people worry about, like, getting caught by a gimmick, and so we want to help you understand where you can kind of discern that.
So those formats on Khan Academy, are those based off of the new format of the SAT? Oh, they are.
And SHMOOP is as well.
Oh, okay.
SHMOOP is updated for the new SAT.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. We really have enjoyed having you come out during the season. And please have some coffee on your way out and